Think about the last time you had a really, really strong, almost overwhelming gut feeling about someone or something.
Like a sudden wave of anxiety on the street.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe you were just in a totally normal meeting, right?
Yeah.
And someone says something completely innocuous, but your stomach just, ties itself into a knot.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We've all been there.
Right. And if you take that exact experience to pretty much any modern therapist or, wellness coach or pop psychology blog right now, the advice you get is remarkably consistent.
Oh, they'll tell you to trust it,
Mm.
without a doubt.
Exactly. They will tell you in no uncertain terms to trust that feeling. They say you have to validate your emotions, lean into your physical intuition, and basically treat your body as this pristine, uncorrupted compass of truth.
I mean, it's the absolute cornerstone of contemporary self-care, isn't it?
It really is.
We're constantly taught that our minds might play tricks on us, or society might condition us, but the body keeps the score. If your physical biology, like that tightness in your chest or that flutter in your stomach, is signaling danger, the modern paradigm says you absolutely must obey it. It's treated as the truest, most authentic version of who you are.
And I mean, that framework is incredibly comforting.
Oh, absolutely.
Gives us a sense of control, right?
Yeah.
And self-trust. But, and this is the massive pivot we're making today, what if we have it completely backwards?
Yeah, what if the compass is broken?
Or worse, what if your gut and your emotions aren't this wellspring of inner wisdom at all? What if instead that feeling in your stomach is actually a highly calibrated piece of biological machinery, like literally installed by a parasite, designed specifically to make you destroy the person standing in front of you?
Wow. I mean, that is
What if your emotional control center is actively run by a spiritual enemy?
that is just the kind of staggering pivot that doesn't just challenge the modern paradigm of emotional intelligence, it completely obliterates it.
Right. It tears it down to the studs.
It really does. It forces a total reevaluation of literally every physical sensation and every psychological impulse a person experiences.
Which brings us to our objective for today's deep dive.
Mhm.
We are unpacking an incredibly intense, radical, and genuinely paradigm-shifting text today. It's a book titled, Is There Someone in My Gut? By an author named Zamir.
And this is not a light read.
Not at all. We're going to explore the author's complete 360-degree shift regarding human biology, the true nature of our emotions, and honestly, the literal reality of spiritual warfare happening right inside the human digestive tract.
But, before we take even one step further, we really need to establish some firm guardrails for this exploration.
Yeah, that's incredibly important.
Because the claims we're about to discuss are intense. They are deeply spiritually charged. The text dives straight into concepts of demonic entities, dark spiritual forces, and a very specific theological worldview regarding the human body. So we want to make it abundantly clear to you, the listener, that we are not taking sides here.
Absolutely not. We are not endorsing these viewpoints as medical facts, and we're definitely not presenting them as definitive theological truths. If you've joined us for a deep dive before, you know our goal is never to tell you what to believe.
Right. We're just the guides.
Exactly. Our job today is to act as your guides through the pages of this specific text. We want to help you understand the author's unique, captivating, and frankly, shocking worldview.
Yeah, we're basically going to look at the architecture of this belief system, the load-bearing pillars of its logic, so to speak. Because once you understand the foundational premises the author is working from, the seemingly bizarre conclusions he reaches about how to interact with the world suddenly start to make a fascinating kind of sense.
Right, it has an internal logic.
Okay.
So to you listening right now, whether you're on your commute, making dinner, or just out for a walk, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like your own reactions, your flashes of irrational anger, or your sudden anxieties were completely out of your control?
Like you're just watching yourself do it.
Yeah. Have you ever felt like a passenger in your own body, watching yourself start an argument you didn't even want to have? Today we're exploring a text that suggests that feeling is not just a metaphor. It suggests it's a completely terrifyingly literal reality.
And to understand how that actually works, we have to start with the physical biology. We have to look at the gut itself.
Right. And honestly, the author's approach to the physical gut is maybe the most audacious element of the entire text.
Oh, for sure. Mostly because he takes something that the scientific community has been obsessing over for the last 2 decades, the gut microbiome, and completely redefines its origin and its entire purpose.
So let's frame up the scientific consensus first, just to give us a baseline.
Good to hear.
In modern biology, The gut microbiome is this vast, incredibly complex ecosystem of trillions of bacteria, fungi, and other microbes living in our digestive tract. Science tells us this ecosystem is a marvel.
Right, it helps us digest food, regulates the immune system.
Exactly. And crucially, through the gut-brain axis, it produces the vast majority of our serotonin. So it affects our mood, our stress levels, our overall mental health.
The conventional wisdom is basically that we have a symbiotic relationship with this ecosystem. Feed it well with prebiotics and probiotics, and it takes care of you. It's a biological marvel of evolution.
Right. But Zamir takes that exact same physiological reality, that profound, proven connection between the gut and the brain, and he just maps this terrifying spiritual overlay right onto it.
He really does. In this text, what we call the gut microbiome isn't a biological marvel at all.
No. It is described as a tool, a highly sophisticated piece of weaponry that was forged and used by the mind of a monster.
The language he uses is so visceral. He refers to these entities as motherless monsters and Satan's servants.
That's heavy.
Yeah, and according to this worldview, these aren't just abstract concepts of evil. They are active, conscious entities that are utilizing our physical biology to construct what the author terms an Enmity Kingdom.
Let's pause on that phrase for a second because it's important.
Yep.
The Enmity Kingdom. Enmity isn't just like a passive dislike of something.
Right. It implies active mutual hatred.
Exactly. It's the state of being an enemy.
Mm.
And the book claims that this biological machinery, this microbiome, has been installed within us with one singular, horrifying purpose.
To generate friction.
Yes, to generate the exact friction necessary to make humans fight, hate, and ultimately destroy one another. It's not there to help you digest your lunch. It is literally a factory for destruction.
And, I mean, the implications of shifting from a biological framework to this purely spiritual one are just massive, even within the context of religious history, right?
How so?
Well, in the many traditional theological views, the human body is seen as fallen or flawed,
Yeah.
maybe subject to decay because of original sin, but it's still fundamentally viewed as a divine creation. It's a temple, even if the roof is leaking a bit.
Right, still inherently good.
Exactly. But Zamir takes this several steps further into the dark. He suggests that the temple isn't just in disrepair, it's actively occupied. We are hosting machineries installed by dark forces. Our biology isn't just weak, it's weaponized against us from the inside out.
I want to try an analogy here, just to see if I'm fully grasping the scale of this, paranoia he's describing.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you buy a brand new car. You sit in the driver's seat, you feel the leather, you turn the key, and you naturally assume you are in total control. You think the engine is designed to get you from point A to point B.
Right, makes sense.
But then somehow you discover that the engine wasn't built by the manufacturer at all. It was actually installed by a highly skilled saboteur. And this saboteur has specifically calibrated the steering, the brakes, and the acceleration to inevitably steer you into a head-on collision with another driver.
Oh, wow.
So every time you press the gas pedal, you aren't just moving forward, you're actively engaging a mechanism that is designed to kill you.
That captures the mechanical dread of the text perfectly, actually. Because the engine, in your analogy, is our physical gut and our physiological responses. The saboteur is this spiritual enemy, these motherless monsters.
Right.
And the really terrifying part of the author's worldview is that you can't just open the door and step out of the car. You are trapped in the driver's seat of the sabotaged vehicle for the entire duration of your life.
Which fundamentally changes the way you have to view every single physical sensation, doesn't it? I mean, if our physical biology is compromised by this enmity kingdom, how does the author suggest we interpret our own bodily health or our daily suffering?
It changes everything.
Because if I get a random stomachache or if I feel that sudden sickening drop in my gut when I'm anxious, I'm not just experiencing a biological misfire anymore.
No, you're experiencing active warfare. In this paradigm, physical discomfort, digestive issues, or those visceral gut reactions, they aren't just your body communicating its biological needs. They are literally the gears of that saboteur's engine grinding together.
That is so intense.
It is. The author is reframing the very nature of human suffering here. You aren't just struggling with a health issue or a temporary bad mood. You are feeling the literal friction of an occupying force within your own biology. The human body is transformed into a literal battlefield where this enmity kingdom sets up its forward operating base.
It's a terrifying concept, but honestly, I can also see a strange, almost counterintuitive comfort in it.
A comfort? How do you mean?
Well, it shifts the blame. If I'm suddenly overwhelmed by an intense, hateful feeling in my gut towards someone I love, the enemy isn't me. I'm not fundamentally broken or inherently evil. The enemy is the machinery installed inside me.
Ah, I see. Yes, that distinction between the self and the machinery is the crucial hinge of the entire book. It's vital, but it begs a massive question.
Which is,
If the physical machinery of the gut is compromised, how does this invisible enemy actually execute its sabotage in our conscious daily lives? I mean, the physical gut is one thing, it's bacteria and tissue, but how does that bridge the gap to our actual behavior?
right, how does the engine actually force the crash? And that naturally brings us to the text's explanation of the psychological realm. We're moving from the biological gut to what we actually feel inside. And this is where the author makes a claim that is, in my opinion, even more shocking than the occupied microbiome.
Oh, without a doubt. The author takes an incredibly radical stance on the nature of human psychology. He says that emotions, as we understand and experience them, are a demonic mantle.
A demonic mantle. Let me make sure I'm fully understanding the weight of that phrase. He's not just saying that emotions can sometimes be manipulated by dark forces, right?
No.
He is saying that emotions themselves are not a natural human response. They aren't a psychological phenomenon. They are a demonic mantle, this cloak of deception that we're forced to wear. The text actually describes emotions as venoms secreted into our system, thrown into an empty bucket to create evil and enmity.
The language is intentionally absolute. And to make sure the reader truly grasps the severity of this disassociation, the author explicitly calls out the pop psychology framework we were discussing earlier. Oh, right.
Yeah, the text states that we should absolutely not view our emotions like the cute, color-coded characters in the Pixar movie Inside Out.
I love that he calls out Inside Out because it is such a perfect cultural touchstone to attack.
It really is.
Because that movie perfectly encapsulates how modern society views the mind. You have joy, sadness, anger, fear, disgust. They live in headquarters. They operate the control panel of the brain. And even though anger might cause a tantrum or sadness might make you cry, they're all ultimately well-meaning.
Right, they're on your side.
Exactly. They are fundamentally part of the protagonist. They're working together to protect her and help her grow. The core message of that movie and of modern psychology is that all emotions serve a valid evolutionary purpose.
But Zamir looks at that exact same control panel and says, none of those characters are you, and none of them have your best interests at heart.
He completely rejects the idea of a benevolent emotional headquarters. He argues that these feelings are not your friends. They aren't evolutionary survival mechanisms. They are, in his exact words, states of beings holding motivations that came from the other realm.
Okay, let's unpack that. States of beings holding motivations. That implies that when I feel anger, it's not just a chemical wash in my brain. It is an actual entity exerting its will upon my consciousness.
Precisely. And the text goes to some very dark, very extreme places to illustrate this point. It states that the things we casually call our daily emotions come from the exact same vaults as the emotions of a notorious serial killer like Ted Bundy.
Oof, that is chilling.
It claims they are distributed and strategized by the minds of entities that would cannibalize children. The book even draws a parallel between this aspect of human nature and the Nephilim.
The giants from biblical lore.
Exactly, the ancient, corrupted, monstrous giants. The author is demanding that you view your own internal feelings with the exact same suspicion and horror you would view a supernatural monster.
Okay, I have to pause here. I really need to push back on behalf of anyone listening because this is a profoundly heavy, almost suffocating concept.
It is a lot to carry, yeah.
Look, I can wrap my head around the idea that destructive feelings, rage, jealousy, unchecked greed, might be described metaphorically or even literally as demonic venoms. We all know what it feels like to be consumed by a dark emotion. It feels awful.
Sure.
But the text doesn't stop there. It says all emotions. It specifically includes seemingly positive ones. It mentions feelings of laughter or sensations of superiority and inferiority.
Yeah, and the inclusion of laughter and joy is easily the most challenging part of this entire framework.
But how does a person even function with that belief?
Yeah.
I mean, if I am playing with my kid and my kid does something hilarious and I burst into genuine laughter, the book says that laughter is stained by the hands of monsters, that it's a venom secreted into my system. How does anyone experience joy? How does this worldview differentiate between a demonic emotion and genuine spiritual happiness? It seems like it would just flatten a human being into an emotionless robot.
I know, it sounds like it. It is an incredibly demanding psychological maneuver, What the author is demanding here is an extreme, militant form of emotional disassociation. He's asking the reader to entirely sever their identity from their emotional responses.
But why? To what end?
Because you have to look at the motivation behind the feeling. If you believe that an entity is using laughter to make you feel a momentary sense of superiority over someone else, or using a feeling of comfort to distract you from a spiritual truth, then that joy is just another weapon of the Enmity Kingdom.
Oh, I see. So it's about interrogating the utility of the feeling. The laughter isn't just laughter, it's a tool being used to manipulate a social dynamic.
Exactly, yes. The text suggests that true, genuine spiritual joy, what the author would consider pure joy, cannot and does not come from this tainted biological machinery. It just can't.
Because the machinery is broken.
Right. It cannot come from the empty bucket of the human emotional system because that system is hooked up to the saboteur's engine. True joy, in this paradigm, has to come entirely from the outside. It has to be downloaded, for lack of a better term, from a divine source, from the other kingdom of purity and love. Everything generated internally by the default human system is suspect. It is all a deceptive tool of enmity.
Man, that requires a level of internal auditing that sounds absolutely exhausting.
Oh, it would be a full-time job.
You can never just feel something and let it wash over you. You have to stop, capture the emotion, and interrogate it under a spotlight. Why am I laughing right now? Is this laughter building a kingdom of love, or is it a venom secreted into my system to make me arrogant? It's the ultimate hypervigilance.
It is, but the author would argue that this exhaustion is the price of freedom. He states that if we just accept our emotions at face value, we have within us everything that makes us interact like orcs from Lord of the Rings.
Okay, that's a really striking visual. Let's explore that. Orcs. In Tolkien's universe, they are fundamentally corrupted creatures.
Right.
They're violent, they hate themselves, they hate each other, and they're driven by the dark will of a master they can't even see to just endlessly destroy things.
And that is exactly how Zamir views baseline humanity operating under the influence of the Enmity Kingdom. To stop being an orc, you have to stop trusting the impulses that drive the orc. You have to assume every single impulse is a lie.
But this leads to a massive practical problem.
What's that?
Well, it's one thing to sit in a room by yourself and silently audit your own joy and sadness, right? But we don't exist in a vacuum. We have to walk through the world. We communicate. We interact with coworkers, spouses, strangers at the grocery store.
True.
If our internal feelings are a deceptive venom, what about the external signals we send to other people? This brings us to the author's strategy for navigating social interactions. And this is where the book transitions from internal philosophy to a very bizarre, highly practical survival guide.
The transition is totally necessary because the internal corruption inevitably leaks out. You can't contain it perfectly. The text claims that our involuntary physical signals, the microexpressions and bodily functions we don't even consciously control, are actively hijacked by these entities.
Okay, this part completely blew my mind. When we talk about communication, we usually think about the words we choose to say.
Right, our speech.
But the book talks about gut growls. It talks about involuntary head shakes. It specifically focuses on facial expressions like a smirk. The author claims these physical actions are projected without our will by these entities simply to spark a conflict with another person.
It's a fascinating extension of the parasitic theory. I mean, think about it from the entity's perspective.
Okay.
The Enmity Kingdom isn't just trying to make you quietly miserable in isolation. Enmity requires an adversary. It requires external conflict to thrive and expand. So it bypasses your conscious brain and uses your body as a raw transmitter to provoke the people around you.
The author gives this incredibly vivid, almost pulp horror analogy to describe what it feels like to realize this is happening. He describes his own experience of navigating society as feeling like a man bitten by a zombie trying to protect others from his own self.
That zombie analogy is doing a massive amount of heavy lifting for the author's social theory. Let's really break it down.
Let's do it.
In zombie media, right, when a character is bitten, there is usually a period before they turn.
Yeah, that tension-filled waiting period.
Exactly. During that window, they know the virus is in their bloodstream. They know it's replicating. They know that very soon they will lose their conscious mind and violently attack the people they love most.
Right, and the hero's move in that situation is always self-sacrifice. They lock themselves in a room, they hand their weapons over to their friends, and they say, "Tie me to the radiator, don't trust me. Whatever I say, whatever I do in 5 minutes, it isn't me speaking. I ain't compromised."
Exactly. The author is taking that extreme cinematic scenario of self-quarantine and applying it to everyday, mundane human interactions. He knows the entities are inside him. He knows they're tweaking his internal emotions and firing off involuntary physical signals like a dismissive smirk, a heavy sigh, an aggressive squaring of the shoulders just to get him into a fight.
Right.
Recognizing the virus is active allows him to step back and say, that smirk you just saw on my face, that wasn't me, that was the zombie virus. That was the entity trying to provoke you.
Let's ground this in the reality of modern life for a second,
Mm-hmm.
because we all deal with the fallout of misread signals constantly.
Oh, all the time.
Think about how often our daily conflicts are born from a tiny, ambiguous signal.
Yeah.
You get a text message from a friend that ends with a period instead of an exclamation point, and suddenly your brain spins a narrative that they hate you.
Or you're presenting an idea in a meeting and a coworker sighs loudly while looking at their phone.
Yes. And the immediate modern psychological response is to address the emotion directly. You say, "Why did you sigh? Are you disrespecting me? We need to talk about my boundaries."
Right, we demand accountability for the signal.
Yes. But in Zamir's worldview, that entire conflict resolution model is a trap. If your brother gets into a fight with someone because he thought that person was smirking at him, the book argues it wasn't the human being smirking. It was the being inside them, pulling the strings of their facial muscles.
And this raises a really profound philosophical and psychological question about human agency.
It really does.
By attributing these microaggressions and even outright offenses to a demonic entity rather than the human being standing in front of you, the author is cultivating an extreme, almost superhuman form of patience. But the cost is the complete removal of agency.
And that is exactly what I was wrestling with while reading this.
Yeah.
Does this absolute disassociation strip away our fundamental humanity?
It's a valid question.
If I say something incredibly cruel to you, or I smirk at you while you're crying, and my excuse is, well, the monster in my gut pulled the levers, I'm just a bitten zombie, doesn't that completely remove my moral responsibility? How do we hold anyone accountable for anything?
That is the paradox. On one hand, yeah, it seems to completely strip away personal accountability for offenses. It reduces humans to mere meat puppets for spiritual forces.
Right.
But on the other hand, look at what it achieves practically. It is perhaps the most efficient psychological mechanism for radical forgiveness ever devised.
How so? Walk me through that.
Well, if you truly, deeply believe that the person offending you is not acting out of their own malice, but is simply the victim of a dark spiritual parasite, you cannot logically be angry at them.
Oh, I see.
You can't hate a victim for exhibiting symptoms of a disease. You can only pity them. You can only feel compassion for the fact that they are infected. It completely short-circuits the biological cycle of retaliation. The book states that without this realization, we are doomed to interact like those orcs, endlessly hacking away at each other over imagined slights, entirely oblivious to the Dark Lord orchestrating the battle.
I'm a man bitten by a zombie, trying to protect others from my own self. When you frame it that way, it really does change the entire geometry of a conflict.
It shifts it entirely.
If you and I are arguing, I'm no longer fighting you. We aren't adversaries. We are both victims of the exact same invisible parasite, and our only real goal should be trying not to let it manipulate us into destroying each other.
Which is exactly why the author boldly states he is not getting into fights anymore. It's not because he has mastered his temper in the traditional sense. It's because he believes he has finally identified the one and only enemy.
And it's not us.
Right. That enemy is never his brother, his neighbor, or his coworker. The enemy is the machinery inside, making them suffer.
Okay, let's take a breath, because we have built a truly terrifying architecture so far.
Yeah, it's pretty dark.
We've established the book's diagnosis of the human condition, and it is bleak. The physical gut is a hijacked engine of war. Our internal emotions are demonic venoms designed to poison us. Our involuntary facial expressions are zombie twitches designed to start wars with our neighbors.
It's a lot.
Recognizing that the true enemy is within requires a massive shift in how we approach every second of our lives. Which leads us to the ultimate desperate question. How do we fight the zombie inside us without destroying ourselves? If the engine is rigged to crash, how do we survive the drive?
And this is where the text executes a massive, blinding pivot. We shield entirely from diagnosing this terrifying demonic reality to the author's prescribed cure.
Thank goodness.
And the cure is just as radical, just as extreme as the diagnosis, but it is based entirely on light, purity, and compassion.
Which, honestly, is a massive relief, because the first half of this deep dive reads like a claustrophobic psychological horror story. But the solution offered in the book isn't about fighting fire with fire. The antidote is about transferring your allegiance. It's about living for another kingdom and growing in love. And that is a capital L love.
Yes, the author emphasizes that despite the fact that a person might be acting like a zombie, despite the fact that they're hosting these motherless monsters, the core identity of every single human being is a sacred child of God.
Right.
They are inherently deserving of unconditional love. The core strategy for surviving the Enmity Kingdom is not to attack the host, but to study how Christ dealt with the world, and specifically how he dealt with these entities, and to emulate him completely.
The book specifically points to the biblical narrative of Christ's temptations in the wilderness as the blueprint for survival. Let's look at the mechanics of that story through Zamir's lens.
It's a perfect case study for this framework.
Exactly.
Mhm.
In that narrative, Christ goes into the desert. He's completely isolated. He is fasting for 40 days, so his physical biology is totally starved and depleted. And in that weakened state, he is actively manipulated, taunted, and tempted by the devil, who represents the ultimate entity of enmity.
It is the ultimate stress test of the biological and spiritual systems.
Exactly. And what happens? Does Christ argue with his emotions? Does he give in to the physical demands of his gut to turn stones to bread?
No, he doesn't.
No. Love and a strict adherence to divine truth proves stronger than every single layer of deception. The text declares as a universal law that monsters have no power in the kingdom of purity and love.
If we contrast the two halves of this book's philosophy, the dichotomy is just striking.
It's night and day.
Literally.
The darkness presented in the first half is absolute.
Yeah.
It penetrates so deeply that even your own laughter is suspected to be tainted venom. But the light presented in the second half is equally absolute and penetrating.
How so?
By consciously viewing every single person you interact with as a sacred, beloved child of God, you totally diffuse the puppetry of the dark forces. You simply refuse to pick up the weapons the Enmity Kingdom has placed in your hands. But practically speaking, how on earth does the author suggest a normal person maintains this level of unconditional love?
It's the million-dollar question.
I mean, it sounds beautiful in a theological treatise, but let's look at the minute-by-minute reality. If my biology is constantly sabotaging me, and my emotions are secreting venom into my bucket, and my face is involuntarily smirking to start a fight with my spouse, how do I maintain a state of pure, Christ-like compassion?
It's not easy.
The internal friction, the cognitive dissonance required to hold those two realities together must be agonizing.
Oh, it is agonizing. It requires a constant active rebellion against what feels like your own nature. The author notes that it requires constantly recognizing the sacredness of the other person to foster this compassion.
So you can't just rely on good vibes.
No, because you cannot rely on feeling affectionate toward them because your feelings are compromised. You have to intellectually and spiritually look past the smirks, past the arguments, past the worldly debris, and focus solely on the divine spark within them. It's a deliberate, forceful overriding of the biological and emotional systems we spent the first half of this deep dive outlining.
So in real time, it looks something like this. Someone rolls their eyes at you. The entity in your gut secretes the venom of pride and anger, and your compromised brain says, hate this person, destroy them, assert your dominance.
Right, that's the default response.
But the newly liberated mind, operating in this new framework, has to catch that impulse before it reaches the mouth and say no. The entity is lying. That person rolling their eyes is a sacred child of God infected by a parasite, and my only permitted response is unconditional love.
Yes.
It is an aggressive, militant form of pacifism.
Militant pacifism is the perfect term for it, actually, because to maintain this seemingly impossible, exhausting stance, you cannot just be passive. You can't just sit back, meditate, and hope you organically feel loving today, because as we learned, your organic feelings are actually synthetic venoms. The author insists that the reader must actively arm themselves. They need specific, heavy-duty spiritual weaponry and foundational truths to survive this daily war.
Which brings us to the final, crucial piece of the author's architecture. If love is the weapon you project outward toward others, truth is the armor that protects your own mind from collapsing.
Exactly.
We're moving into how the book equips the reader to actually survive this reality without losing their sanity.
The theological framework here relies heavily on anchoring oneself in an absolute, unshakable truth to clear the mind of what the author calls the debris of lies. And to build this armor, the text brings in some heavy theological hitters.
Yes, the author quotes St. Augustine, which I found to be one of the most fascinating and revealing moments in the text.
Oh, the quote about the lion.
Yes. The quote he uses is, "The truth is like a lion. You don't have to defend it. Let it loose. It will defend itself."
Let's break down why that specific Augustine quote is so vital to Zamir's entire project. We have to view it through the lens of the emotional disassociation we discussed earlier.
Okay, lay it out for me.
If your internal emotions are deceptive venoms, you cannot rely on them to defend your worldview. You cannot say, I know I am right because I feel right, because the feeling is manufactured by a monster.
Right.
Therefore, you have to rely on an objective external truth that exists completely independently of your biology.
You just open the cage, let the lion of truth out, and stand behind it. You don't need to argue with the zombie virus. You just let the lion deal with it.
Precisely. The truth does the heavy lifting, not your compromised emotions. The text also mentions the influence of modern theologians, specifically pointing to Paul Washer as a profound guide for navigating this warfare.
What does he bring to the table?
It brings in this concept of taking the kingdom of God by force. The author says that whether a person is going through intense trial, social persecution, or just the crushing daily weight of their own compromised sinfulness, nothing can separate them from the love of Christ.
Right.
It heavily references the Apostle Paul's famous declaration at the end of his life of having fought the good fight and finished the race.
That language, fighting the good fight, taking the kingdom by force, wearing swords and breastplates of truth and righteousness, it really reinforces that this is not a passive New Age spiritual retreat.
No, not at all.
You aren't just letting go of bad vibes. You're engaged in close quarters combat. The ultimate goal of the author isn't just to help you feel better. It's to forge readers into kingdom builders.
Kingdom builders, which is the exact deliberate antithesis of the Enmity Kingdom. The dark entities build enmity. The liberated human builds a kingdom of love.
They're meant to live with their eyes wide open, actively rejecting and deconstructing the world's demonic culture of enmity every single time they interact with another human.
But the foundation of all of this, the only mechanism that makes this militant, hyper-vigilant, exhausting lifestyle sustainable over a lifetime, is a total, uncompromising reliance on the Father's love.
The ultimate safety net.
The text presents God's love not just as a nice theological concept, but as the ultimate biological and spiritual cure. It is the only true strength against every malady the Enmity Kingdom throws at you.
I want to connect that reliance back to the Augustine quote about letting the truth loose like a lion. That seems to be the author's primary motivation for writing this book in the first place, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
He feels he has discovered this terrifying hidden reality about how the gut and emotions are hijacked, and he has discovered this liberating absolute reality about Christ's love being the only cure. He isn't trying to defend it with 1,000 scientific footnotes. He just has to let the lion out of the cage and let the reader deal with it.
That is exactly what the book is, opening the cage.
But for you, the listener, taking all of this in today, it's a massive amount of conceptual weight to carry. I mean, how does this ultimate reliance on the Father's love practically bridge the gap between our flawed, zombie-bitten human weakness and the total spiritual freedom the author promises? How do you get from point A to point B?
It bridges the gap through total radical surrender.
Surrender?
Yes. If you accept the premise of this book, you have to accept a deeply humbling reality. You are fundamentally incapable of fixing yourself. Your biological hardware is hacked. Your emotional software is compromised. You cannot trust your own internal compass.
Right.
Therefore, your only hope of survival is an external rescue. The Father's love isn't a comforting thought in this worldview. It is a literal lifeline dropped into a burning building, pulling you out of the Enmity Kingdom. It replaces your reliance on corrupted internal machinery with a reliance on a divine external truth.
It is the ultimate rejection of the modern self-help movement, then.
100%.
It's a complete surrender of self-reliance. You have to stop trusting your gut, stop validating your toxic emotions, and start trusting the lion.
And he also believes that when people are finally rooted in that kind of external absolute faith, they take the proper and right trajectory toward true healing and unity. They stop seeing each other as monsters to be fought, and they start seeing each other as fellow sacred beings caught in the exact same war, desperately in need of the exact same grace.
Okay, let's take a breath and zoom out. because we have covered an immense, challenging amount of ground today.
We really have.
We started this deep dive by holding up the foundational mantra of modern wellness, the idea that your gut instinct and your emotions are your truest self. And we looked at a text that shatters that concept into a million pieces.
We explored a worldview that flips biology and psychology completely upside down. We looked at the gut microbiome not as a marvel of human evolution, but as an enmity kingdom forged and operated by dark entities. We deconstructed human emotions, pulling them away from the comforting evolutionary models of pop psychology and reframing them as deceptive, weaponized venoms drawn from a demonic vault.
We talked about the profound, demanding, and almost terrifying practice of disassociating from your own body, treating a smirk, a sigh, or a gut growl as a zombie twitch that you have to actively protect other people from.
Yeah.
And finally, we looked at the radical antidote to all this darkness. The militant practice of unconditional compassion, the exhausting but liberating work of viewing every single human you meet as a sacred child of God, armed with the breastplate of truth and the unconditional love of Christ.
It is a philosophical journey from absolute internal darkness, paranoia, and hijacked biology to a demanding radical light. It asks the reader to relinquish all trust in their own bodily and emotional responses in exchange for a pure, external spiritual clarity.
And whether you view this text as literal, mechanical, spiritual warfare, or simply as a fascinating, extreme psychological framework designed to achieve radical forgiveness, it absolutely demands that you look at the world differently. It forces you to pause and question the impulses you have taken for granted your entire life.
It certainly leaves no room for complacency. It requires living every single moment of the day, as the text says, with your eyes wide open.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final, provocative thought to mull over, something to carry with you into your day, your commute, or your next interaction.
Okay, what is it?
We live in a world that places so much emphasis on trusting your gut and validating your emotions. But what if you took just one single day, just tomorrow, to question every single instinct you have? What if you treated every defensive smirk, every flash of sudden anger, and every petty annoyance not as your truth, but as a potential deception designed to cause a crash? If you stripped all of that internal noise away and forced yourself to respond to everyone you met, the barista, your boss, your spouse, only with intentional, unconditional love, how differently would you see the people in your life tomorrow?